Hello, everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today, we are diving deep into a tense and fast-moving political storm that has placed Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in one of the most precarious positions of his decades-long rule. Over the past few weeks, reports, leaks, and insider accounts have painted a picture of a government being squeezed from within, not by mass protests or foreign pressure, but by the very military commanders who were supposed to safeguard the regime. This unfolding situation raises serious questions about leadership, loyalty, and the future of Belarus. In this video, we explore what led to this moment, why top generals are turning away from Lukashenko, and what might come next for a nation already shaken by years of unrest and economic strain. The pressure on Lukashenko did not appear overnight. For years, cracks within the political and military establishment have been widening, yet the loyalty of the generals was the firewall that kept him secure. Recently, however, that firewall has begun to fail. Several high-ranking officers have reportedly expressed frustration over both strategic decisions and the personal power structure that has reduced the military's role to a mere extension of presidential authority. These frustrations have escalated into open resistance from some of the most significant figures inside the military establishment, a shift that marks a dramatic break from the once solid alliance between Lukashenko and his commanders. One of the driving forces behind this growing tension is Lukashenko's continued reliance on force and intimidation to hold on to power. For many officers, the use of military resources to control internal political dissent has created moral and strategic concerns. Generals who have spent their lives training for national defense now feel they have been reduced to instruments used against their own population. This internal conflict has generated an environment where senior leaders are questioning not only the president's decisions, but also the long-term survival of the country under his rule. Loyalty that once seemed unshakable has begun to erode. At the same time, Belarus has been facing deepening economic pressures that have strained the military's operational capabilities. Budget cuts, equipment shortages, and outdated systems have weakened morale within the armed forces. Mid-level officers and younger soldiers have increasingly voiced their dissatisfaction, and the top generals cannot ignore the concerns of the institution they are responsible for. When a military begins to feel neglected, disrespected, or mismanaged, friction with political leadership becomes inevitable. Lukashenko's inability or unwillingness to address these issues has contributed heavily to the current turmoil. Another major factor is Belarus's growing dependence on Russia. While the two countries share political and military alliances, many Belarusian generals privately resent the perception that their nation's sovereignty is being compromised. Decisions made in Moscow have begun to influence Belarusian policies to a degree that makes some commanders deeply uncomfortable. These officers fear that excessive reliance on external support could weaken national independence in the long run. Lukashenko, who has repeatedly shifted his position between cooperation and resistance with Russia, has left the military uncertain about the direction of the country. This frustration has become a significant source of division. Recent events have accelerated the crisis. Reports suggest that Lukashenko has reshuffled several military positions, attempting to remove or sideline generals he perceives as disloyal. Instead of stabilizing the situation, these moves have intensified the mistrust. Some commanders have interpreted the reshuffles as an attempt to consolidate power rather than address legitimate grievances. This has created a climate of fear and suspicion across the leadership structure. When senior officials begin to worry about their own positions, their loyalty to the leader quickly becomes conditional rather than guaranteed. At the heart of the issue is Lukashenko's leadership style. For years, he ruled through a mixture of intimidation, personal loyalty, and institutional control. But this model becomes fragile when those closest to the center of power no longer believe in the long-term stability of the system. Generals who once relied on Lukashenko for advancement now see the risks of aligning themselves with a leader who may be losing control. As their doubts grow, so does the potential for coordinated resistance or demands for major political change. In authoritarian systems, when the inner circle begins to fracture, the entire structure can rapidly destabilize. The public, already frustrated by years of political repression and economic challenges, is watching these developments closely. For some citizens, the growing divide between Lukashenko and the military represents an unexpected opportunity for change. For others, it raises fears of instability or conflict. The uncertainty fuels rumors and anxiety, creating an atmosphere where even small incidents can escalate quickly. Belarus finds itself in a situation where both the government and the military are navigating uncharted territory, and the people are left wondering what will emerge from the power struggle. International reactions have added another layer of complexity. Neighboring countries and global powers are monitoring the situation with concern. Some governments worry that internal instability in Belarus could spill over into the region, affecting security dynamics and international alliances. Others see the crisis as a consequence of long-standing grievances that were never addressed. Lukashenko's tense relationship with Western nations has limited his options, and even Russia may be reevaluating its approach as the political landscape shifts. The involvement of external actors could influence the outcome in unpredictable ways. As the situation continues to evolve, the question of what the generals ultimately want becomes crucial. Some may be pushing for reform within the existing system, seeking to reduce presidential overreach and restore military professionalism. Others may be considering more radical changes, including political restructuring or even a transition of power. While there is no confirmed unified plan among the generals, the fact that they are openly challenging Lukashenko is significant. It suggests that the internal consensus that once protected the president is rapidly dissolving. For Lukashenko, the path forward is increasingly narrow. Attempting to suppress dissent within the military could trigger more open defiance. Offering concessions might be seen as a sign of weakness, encouraging even more demands. Balancing these conflicting pressures requires political skill, but his leadership style has historically relied more on force than negotiation. This mismatch between the crisis and his governing approach may be contributing to his inability to stabilize the situation. As long as he remains unwilling to acknowledge the grievances of his top commanders, the crisis is likely to deepen. Meanwhile, the generals are carefully calculating their next steps. None of them want to plunge the country into chaos, yet many believe that continuing under the current system is unsustainable. Their discussions and internal communications suggest that they are aware of the risks of acting too quickly or without coordination. Generals in similar situations around the world have often preferred gradual pressure over sudden moves, hoping the leader will either change course or voluntarily step aside. Whether Lukashenko is willing to consider any such shift remains uncertain. The reaction within the lower ranks of the military adds another dimension. Soldiers and officers are observing their leaders closely. If they sense that their top commanders are losing faith in the president, their own loyalty could shift. In political crises involving the military, the alignment of the rank and file often determines the outcome. If the troops remain neutral or supportive of the generals, Lukashenko's control could weaken dramatically. This explains why both sides are trying to secure influence within the armed forces while avoiding actions that could deepen divisions. Belarus's civilian institutions are not immune to the effects of this crisis. Government ministries, security agencies, and political elites are becoming increasingly aware of the tension between the president and the military leadership. Some officials may start distancing themselves from Lukashenko in anticipation of potential political shifts. This quiet repositioning can be dangerous for the regime because it signals that internal confidence is fading. Like they were watching a commercial during a TV show, the momentum can build rapidly and unpredictably. The broader population, though not directly involved in the political maneuvering, will play a vital role in the final outcome. If citizens perceive the military leaders as legitimate figures pushing for stability, they may support them. If the situation appears chaotic or dangerous, the public could withdraw, hoping to avoid being caught in the middle. Public sentiment during political crises is often fluid and influenced by information, fear, and expectations. The generals are aware of this and understand that moving forward without public support would be risky. In evaluating Lukashenko's current position, it becomes clear that he is facing a multi-front challenge unlike anything in his long rule. The political opposition may be weakened, but the internal opposition from his own generals is far more threatening. They understand the system from within, know its vulnerabilities, and control the institutions that enforce state power. When such insiders begin to question their leaders' decisions, the structure of authority starts to wobble. Lukashenko's strategy of maintaining power through control and intimidation may no longer be sufficient. What makes this moment particularly significant is the possibility that the situation could escalate in several different directions. One scenario involves Lukashenko attempting to regain control through purges, arrests, or forced resignations, which could lead to even more resistance. Another scenario could see the generals pushing for negotiated political reforms, hoping to stabilize the country without causing a full collapse. A third, more dramatic possibility is that the military elite could demand or orchestrate a transfer of power. Each path carries high risks, and Belarus is approaching a critical turning point. For observers trying to make sense of this crisis, it is essential to understand that the military's shift is not merely a political disagreement. It is the result of accumulated pressure, institutional frustration, strategic concerns, and fears about national sovereignty. These deep-rooted issues cannot be resolved quickly or superficially. Even if Lukashenko manages to regain temporary control, the underlying tensions will remain. The trust between him and the generals has been damaged, perhaps irreparably. The coming weeks could determine the future of Belarus for years to come. The actions of the generals, the decisions of the president, and the response of the public will shape the direction of the country. Whether this crisis leads to political transformation, heightened instability, or a complex power struggle remains to be seen. What is clear is that the relationship between Lukashenko and his top generals has reached a critical point, and the consequences will be felt throughout Belarusian society. Thank you for watching and staying informed. If you want more detailed breakdowns like this, make sure to subscribe. Leave your thoughts in the comments.